Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. And welcome back, everybody. This is for parents. We're going to help you navigate some of the challenges that we all have as parents. I never got the manual. They always talk about this manual that you should get as a parent. Yeah, there's books out there. But a lot of this stuff you don't see, and it's hard to apply it to your kids sometimes. She's created a great coaching practice, a great program that helps parents. And today we're going to focus on the resilience of your kids. We want our kids to have a back, stand up for themselves, but not be a bully at the same time. And she is Dr. Michelle Alden. She's back with us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's good to see you.
You too. You too. And loving that we're talking about this. My first thought when it comes to resilience in your kids is when they're going through a challenge, many of us will turn around and say, stop crying. You got this. Come on, man up. And it just squashes the emotions. We're not talking about that, right? We're allowing them to express their emotions, but have a bit of a thicker skin. That's what I'm to tell you. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. I mean, I want kids and I want to help parents to let kids have their feelings. I think that's been a big barrier that we've kind of crossed in the last, I don't know how many years, where we're all allowed to have our feelings, and feelings are not bad, even though they might feel bad. So I'm all for letting kids have their feelings. I think when we're talking about resiliency, we're talking about not allowing them or helping them to work through that discomfort is where I see a stumbling block with a lot of parents. And a lot of the kids that I work with have mental health diagnosis. And so we're very tuned into their feelings because they're showing them in big ways. But I feel like one of the goals in parenting is for our kids to be healthy and functioning, to whatever that's going to look like for our kids with their challenges and things like that.
Can we look at a hypothetical situation involving a child, and you can pick the age just so we have more of a reference, and how you would suggest a parent handle it, what we should say to that child?
So I had two thoughts that came to mind. One was I heard that there were some kids that today were not going to be able to go to school, like maybe teenage kids, high school kids that are maybe a little bit more aware of situations. So we're talking today, it's the day after election voting day.
Well, I want to interject here, if I may, to your point. There is a private school in New York City that is allowing students to take the day off just because of the emotional heaviness of today. What about the teachers? But yes, to your point, that's a fact. That's truth.
Yeah, and I just think it feels ridiculous to me that's what we're saying is the answer. I think that kids, all of us, like, we have hard things. We can be upset. We can be sad, mad, disappointed, all of those things, but we still have to be able to function. And so I think part of building resiliency in our kids is to acknowledge that, yes, this is hard. And I do have some questions about how much we're putting on kids prior to this, that they would be so upset and so anxious that they can't go to school. But that's another topic. But in helping them deal with the disappointment of whatever it is, even if it's that they didn't get invited to somebody's party or whatever, we have to help them that, yes, that is hard and that is difficult, but we can also put this in this place and go do what we have to go do today.
What would you say? How would you verbalize it in a situation similar to that?
So I work with the parents to be able to say to their kids, like, to be able to sit with them in that moment. I've had some parents that had a daughter that was having a lot of emotions. She was, yelling and screaming and saying that she couldn't She needed to talk to somebody else besides her parents. And I just had them stay close by, not so close to irritate her, but close by, and just say, we're here to keep you safe. But when you're a little bit calmer, like let's talk, let's deal with that. And then finally just letting her know, like, we're here, you're okay. And so in that sense, sometimes it's just being there, just saying, like, get yourself calm, but I'm going to be right here until you're ready. And with younger kids, a lot of times it is just being close by. You don't have to use a lot of words. I think a lot of times parents try to use a lot of words when the kids are not in the processing part of their brain. They're in the emotional part of their brain. And we're trying to talk to them like as if they're rational, because sometimes they can actually sound a little bit rational in what they're throwing out there. But waiting until they get a little bit calmer and then saying, like, I want to hear about that. I want to know what you're thinking about that. And letting kids know too, that just because you have an emotion or you have a thing that you want to do or feel strongly about, doesn't mean that that's going to happen. That, you may feel really strongly that you don't want to go to school, or that you can't do that outside of being sick, but it may still, the answer still may be, and we are still going to go to school. We're going to still carry on with our day.
Yeah, you bring, it's such a great point, because we try to verbalize things as parents and, take the child through everything. But a lot of times we're leaving out the emotion, and all they're hearing is, like, remember Charlie Brown? After a while, they're staring into space while you think you're doing everything to make them feel better, but you're really not. Minimize your words, touch on the emotion, and kind of let it go. That's kind of what I'm feeling here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I feel like the frustration from parents when they feel like they explained it so well.
Yeah, right.
And then the kid is still like, but why? Or it does the exact opposite of what you just said because they didn't hear it. I used to, with my son, sometimes I would ask him, like, what did you just hear? And thought I said so many wonderful things, and he would say, that you don't like me and that you don't want me to do anything with my friends, or, something like that. And I'd be like, what? So, what we think we're saying or doing. And that's not a bad follow-up question to ask. Just be prepared that their takeaway may not be what you thought it was.
And is there a place for the longer version as a parent? Like you said before, in that situation, the child is not in that processing stage. Is there a place for it, or shut the blank up, keep it short, and focus on the emotion of the child?
Most of the time, it involves a parent needing to use less words and listening. Sometimes it can be helpful to repeat back to them, but some kids will get really frustrated with that too if you're only parenting back, because they're not processing that. I look at it too, that sometimes we're just giving kids more fuel for the fire of stuff they're going to ask you about or question you about. So, I think that there are times when you can have really good conversations with your kids. And this is one thing I really love about one of the trends I see in parenting that's shifted over the years, is I do feel like kids and parents are talking more about their emotions and their friendships and their relationships and things like that, but not in those moments when they're just highly explosive or they're really leaning hard into something that they want, and they're, having maybe even be a teenage tantrum, and so really being careful that they're calm enough to hear it. I found with a lot of kids, the best conversations happen as you're doing something together rather than sitting and now we're going to talk about this. I want you to tell me what happened at school today, kind of things. Even we have this thing called snack and chat that we add into our schedule. And you have to be careful, because if you're really pushing for the chat part of it, you might not get that as a parent. We talked last time about, you ask your kids, tell me what happened at school today. And you get, nothing, fine.
Did I share the hair story with my daughter?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that.
Just it's reframing it instead of saying, what was your day like? Or how was school? I got the same answers like every parent gets. And then I just reframed it to what's it feel like to have the most beautiful hair of any girl on the planet? Floodgates open. We're talking about resistance, but I also want to, with that in mind, talk about the things that you shouldn't say to your kids. For example, is it bad to say, I know how you feel? Well, I'm on the fence on that one. Maybe as a parent, as a kid, you've been through, somewhat similar situations, but you didn't. You're not exactly them. Those things are, that statement there, I know how you feel. Is that something that we should make sure we never say?
I think that the intent behind it is to try to help your kid to normalize it, right? To
Sure.
help them not feel like they're the only ones. But
Yeah.
I think what happens a lot of times, especially as an adult or a parent, is then it kind of becomes about us. And maybe we start telling our story of like, I know how you feel because when I was a kid,
Yes.
this happened.
Yeah. And you mean well. It's coming from a good place. I'm decades older than you. I've got experience and I want to share that experience. It comes from a good place. But yeah, I totally get that. Now I see it. You've made it about you.
Yeah. So I think, I think that I've found, and this is also my role as a counselor and a coach, that most of the time they're not interested in my story. They want help with their problem. And I also think, to their credit, like, we really don't know exactly how it feels to be a kid right now in this day and age with all the things, just like we probably felt like our parents really didn't know what that was
Right.
like, when we were kids. But I do feel like there is a place to identify with that feeling because we have experienced those feelings before. So I encourage parents to name a feeling that they are getting out of what happened, because most of the time, the parents are seeing the anger piece of it, and it's coming out in anger. And there's usually something behind that. And some of the emotions that kids don't express because they're harder emotions, like they make you feel weaker, are embarrassment or disappointment or even loneliness. But embarrassment and disappointment are two big ones. So like when a kid's like having, all the emotion about something and they're really mad and they're going to, punch somebody because, they said this thing, being able to say, wow, it sounds like you got really embarrassed, and just, saying, not asking them, did you get embarrassed? Are you feeling this way? But just naming that emotion can help a lot. And if you're wrong, the kids will tell you, like, I wasn't embarrassed. I was frustrated, or, they'll say something and you can kind of stay in there with them, but they'll give you some more information.
Wow.
To go with it.
That's a good one. Yeah. And it's also, if you say, were you embarrassed? It's almost slightly confrontational, where you're putting them on the spot, as opposed to, wow, you must have felt really embarrassed. It's just a couple of extra words, the right words, leads it in there, and actually shows a little empathy on your part as a parent.
Yeah. And I think too, I think sometimes we've been told like to stay calm. And so we're almost so calm when kids are having these big emotions that we're not even present. We're kind of like detached from it. And I found it to be really effective sometimes to come in strong and identify with it. It's like, oh my gosh, that sounds so embarrassing. Like, how did you handle it? What did you do? And it kind of empowers them a little bit, like, hey, anybody would be embarrassed when this happened. So what did you do when you got embarrassed?
Wow.
And it
I love
promotes
this.
a better.
Yeah. And it's just you're just reframing the situation and showing some empathy and understanding. Resilience. So this is a friend. I just talked with her last night. And he is 15, and he was walking down the stairs at school. Another student tripped him. I don't know what the dynamics there. I don't think they're, rivals or anything. It was just one of those things, or the kid was being a jerk, whatever it was. But her son turned around and hit the other kid. Now, no injuries or anything like that, but schools have zero tolerance for anything, and he got suspended, and the other student got suspended too. In a situation like that, where your kid got in trouble, whether it was their fault or not, what would you say? How would you position that? Because discipline comes up a lot of times in parenting.
Yeah, so I kind of like that both there was action on both sides. I feel like that can be a really helpful place to start as a parent, because I think we get really defensive of like, well, my kid shouldn't have gotten in trouble. What happened to this other kid? But realizing like this was an action and a reaction, and they both need to be addressed, and letting the school handle that. Like, this is the school's policy, not. I think it's really important to not badmouth the school about their policies. Like,
okay, so that's a really, I don't mean to cut you off, but we're dissecting here. Great point. Where the school is the school. You can't turn around and say, how dare they do that to you? It's not going to change anything. And that's their policy. It's a zero tolerance. But it also, I believe, is the same thing between parents who may have gotten divorced, saying something about the other parent. That's, you're going in a bad territory there. That's, they're parenting one way, you're parenting another. Hopefully you're on the same page, but to throw them under the bus. So yeah. And by the way, saying something about the school, you're just turning it into a negative. You're going even further deeper. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, well, and it really undermines the authority, right? Of whether it's the other parent or another adult or the school or the teacher. And I think that does not build resiliency, because it's like we're teaching kids, like, whatever your action is, like, I'm going to defend you, and I'm going to, your action is always, there's always a good reason for it, and
right.
It doesn't help them to process that, because what happened is what happened. And I'm always willing to move on from it with kids too. It's like, okay, so yeah, that's what happens if you hit somebody at school.
Right.
But they trip me. It's like, yeah, but that's what happens if you hit somebody at school, right?
Because it is what it is. That's what happens when you do it.
It's like, so what can we do next time? And what would you do differently? Or, I remember one time I was processing with a kid an incident that happened on the bus, and he was telling me, like, he wanted to tell me all about what the other kid did. And I said, well, tell me exactly where you were and what you did. And he had talked about this kid kind of, picking a fight with him. And then he I think he pushed the kid or something. But then when I said, so what would you do differently next time if this same thing happened? If this kid, because we can't change him, we don't know what he's going to do. If the same thing happened, what would you do? And the kid said, I would have hit him sooner.
Oops.
And I was like, okay, well, that's an answer, but where would that have gotten you? And what can we, so, don't be afraid of those answers. It's just, sometimes they can kind of make you laugh, like, because it is just our impulse, right?
You brought back a memory very briefly here. My son, 8th grade, friends in the lunchroom. He's got a friend. And the friend was saying, I bet you can't hit me from there. And my son's like, I bet I can, but you can't. And my son just went, hit him. Teacher saw it. Son got taken down to the principal's office. And there was a short suspension because of that, because that's what happens. Zero tolerance. You hit another kid, whether you're joking about it, whether you're serious, that's the way it goes. Yeah. So to your point, can't question the authority.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important in building strong kids, like, to know that there's rules, right? Like, there's rules in society, there's rules in our social norms, things like that. And no matter what your diagnosis is or your issue is, it doesn't mean that you're always going to get a free pass, or that you should get a free pass from what helps our society to function better.
Yeah.
And I think that's important.
Yeah. Especially with resilience. And again, it goes back to the, enabling your child, where every kid gets a trophy. No, it shouldn't be that way. The ones that deserve it, that, did something, should. It's not like all of them. Any other thoughts on resilience, Michelle?
Yeah, I think just what that last thing that you said, I was thinking about that and building resilience, like when kids kids play sports or they do an activity, or they, whenever they're learning something new, they're going to hit these challenges where it's hard, whether it's because they're having to do laps and run and get in shape, or they're not on a winning team, or, whatever that is. Like, we help build resiliency by not just allowing them to like quit because it's hard, or, I work with some kids where it's like, we talk about whether they need to not be in that activity because it may not be doing much help. But I'm just talking about, our mindset of like, if this gets too hard for my child, they shouldn't have to do it. And instead of building those skills to help them to be able to do it, it may take some kids longer if they want to win. I have, like with families, we have them play games. It's like, well, we don't play games because
if you're like me, you go to church week after week.
Right. I want to share, I just found on your website, you have free videos that you offer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I just found it. Fantastic. You work with children and adults as well, their parents, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How does that work? Somebody just reaches out to you. They do you do therapy sessions virtually with the child and the parent?
So I primarily work with the parents outside of their time with the child, although sometimes they will videotape something that's happening at home, and then I'll talk with the parents about how to handle that situation differently. A lot of times the situations are things that happen over and over, like every time we do this is what happens. So we talk through some of that. I help the parents to set up structure, and give them the actual tools to do it, not just tell them like, you need more structure or you need this. I give them those tools to do that. So they get a lot of, intensive help from me. And then every once in a while, I'll like meet the kids. They'll have them come on the video or something like that. But for the most part, I don't have to meet the kids to know what's going on. The parents will let me know. I do have an option where people can have me come to their home for 2 days of intensive work if they feel like, no, like you really need to see this, you won't believe it. And that can be helpful. I feel pretty confident in being able to help them without that as well.
I love the fact that you offer the tools to the parents, instead of saying just words, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to work on. And you're so approachable. You really are. You're so grounded. Oh, it's amazing. It really is. How do we find you, Michelle?
So you can find me on my website, parentingchallengingkids.com. That's a good way to get in touch with me. You can set up a free consultation right from the website. Also, I have tons of videos on YouTube, same channel called Parenting Challenging Kids. And that's a good way to kind of get to know me and what I'm saying and what I believe. And you can contact me from there as well.
Fantastic. And as we identified, you can do this virtually as well for anybody, anywhere. Yep. Thank you for today, Michelle. Learned a lot. And just some of the different ways to approach certain things, to, if you will, pull things out of your kid. I'm going to work on that. I really am.
I'm always working on it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah. Thank you.
We'll catch up soon. We'll be right back. Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Can I touch this? Where does sand come from? Is this tree good for climbing? What happens if I mix these two things together? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Storing your guns securely is the best way to prevent family fire, including unintentional shootings. For more information on safe gun storage and ways to keep your family safe, visit endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org.
What do we keep in the attic? What's this thing called? Can I ride my bike backwards?
Like I said, kids are curious. It's up to us to keep them safe. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.